Has India just shifted the balance of world politics? For decades, the West has been the central force shaping the global system. However, while the foundations of that order have been challenged by new geopolitical and regional blocs, none have appeared to truly undermine Western dominance. Until now. At the end of August 2025, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi attended a meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organisation in Tianjin, China. There, he was warmly greeted by the Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russia's President Vladimir Putin in what many see as a potential turning point in world politics. But why exactly is this so significant, and does it really amount to a seismic change in international relations? Hello and welcome. My name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict and security. There's little doubt that the West, usually defined as like-minded liberal democracies, including the United States, Europe and others such as Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Japan and South Korea, has dominated the international system. Through its financial clout, military power and diplomatic dominance of global institutions, it's been the world's preeminent power bloc, often setting the international political, economic, strategic and even cultural agenda. But in recent years, that dominance has looked less certain. As other parts of the world press for their voice to be heard, the rise of the BRICS, a group including Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, came to be seen as laying the foundations for a new multipolar world order. Yet, for many, it seemed more rhetoric than reality, not least of all due to a lack of fundamental cohesion. However, India's sudden tilt towards China and Russia has renewed the sense that the global balance of power may finally and truly be shifting. To understand what's happening, we must step back and look at the history of Western power. Our story starts with the emergence of European colonialism in the 16th century. Following a rapid expansion in the late 1800s, especially in Africa and Asia, the European powers and the United States came to dominate the world. And even after the Second World War and the start of decolonisation, what was now called the West remained preeminent. Despite Soviet competition during the Cold War and the emergence of the non-aligned movement, which brought together newly independent states as an alternative bloc, Western countries retained enormous influence thanks to their economic strength, technological know-how and soft cultural power. Meanwhile, bodies such as NATO and the European Union reflected Western visions of a global order built around principles of liberal democracy. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, this dominance seemed cemented. As the 1990s came to be seen as the unipolar moment, the United States became the sole hyperpower. But since the turn of the millennium, cracks have appeared. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan undermined Western credibility and the aura of invincibility. Likewise, the 2008 financial crisis undercut the West's economic prestige. At the same time, new powers began to emerge. China's meteoric rise made it the world's second largest economy. Meanwhile, Russia, though fundamentally weakened, reasserted itself through military interventions in Ukraine and the Caucasus and dominated international energy politics. At the same time, the global South increasingly demanded a voice of its own. All this would eventually come together with the emergence of the BRICS. Founded in 2009, it soon came to symbolise the calls for a new multipolar world order, with talk of reforming global governance, building alternative financial institutions and amplifying global southern interests. And yet, for all its grand ambitions, it's often looked more like a talking shop than a true rival to Western power. Despite taking on new members, the countries involved often have wildly diverging interests. Indeed, many retain close links to the West, and Western-led institutions still dominate international relations. But other groupings have also emerged. One of the most important and interesting of these is the Shanghai Cooperation Organisation. Founded in 2001 by China, Russia and several Central Asian states to promote security and economic cooperation, it's since expanded to include India, Pakistan, Iran and most recently Belarus. Today, it's the world's largest regional organisation by landmass and population. In addition to its 10 full members, Afghanistan and Mongolia are formal observers, while 14 countries, including Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, participate as dialogue partners. More to the point, it increasingly serves as a platform for non-Western cooperation and a counterweight to Western dominance in international institutions. And it's against this backdrop that Narendra Modi's presence at the organisation's latest meeting has attracted so much attention. On its own, an SCO meeting would probably have made relatively little international news. Russia and China's close ties are scarcely new, and many of the other countries are seen as rather peripheral in international affairs. But Modi's high-profile participation changed the story entirely. For a start, relations between India and China have long been tense. Indeed, for decades, India viewed China as its primary threat. The two countries have repeatedly clashed over their Himalayan border, including a confrontation in 2020 that killed 20 Indian and 4 Chinese soldiers. On top of this, Beijing has supported Pakistan, India's arch-rival. As a result, in recent years, India has even drawn closer to the United States, Australia and Japan through a body known as the Quad. This is widely understood to be aimed at counterbalancing Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific region. And yet, here was Modi in China, standing alongside Xi and Putin, openly signalling his hope to work more closely with Beijing and Moscow. For many Western observers, this has been seen as a seismic moment. It sends the message that India could no longer be seen as an actual or potential Western partner. Instead, it's now willing to work closely with the West's key strategic competitors. So, how did it come to this? A key factor is the war in Ukraine. When Russia invaded in 2022, Western states imposed sweeping sanctions to isolate Moscow diplomatically and economically. But while Russia took a significant economic hit, it also found new buyers for its exports, including India. Despite Western pressure, India quickly began importing major Russian products, including oil, coal and fertilisers, thus helping to keep Moscow afloat. But while India insisted that purchasing oil was a pragmatic decision based on its own national interests, it was seen by Washington as a crucial step to undermine international solidarity over Ukraine. As a result, and despite decades of work by the United States to build up its ties with India, in late August 2025, Trump raised duty on many Indian imports to as much as 50%. To justify this, he cited India's continued purchases of Russian oil as undermining his efforts to broker a peace agreement between Moscow and Kyiv. But rather than see India give in, the economic pressure has had a radically different outcome. Furious at the decision, it has instead driven India's nationalist Prime Minister Narendra Modi closer to Beijing and Moscow. His message is clear. If Washington penalises India, then India has other options. This was more than underscored in China. As well as meeting both Xi and Putin separately and making a great show of warm relations, the three countries even held an informal trilateral get-together. And it's these images of Russia, China and India seemingly united and closer than ever that has caused such shockwaves. I hope you're finding this useful. If so, please do give it a like and perhaps subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much, and now back to the video. But does this really mean the emergence of a new power bloc and the end of Western dominance? For China, this was undoubtedly a major diplomatic victory. Xi has long promoted the idea of the global south rallying around Beijing as a counterweight to the West. Having India on board has lent this invaluable credibility. Likewise, for Russia, it was equally valuable. It's seen as proof that it's not isolated on the world stage, despite Western sanctions. However, while it may be tempting to see this as a new power bloc and even the start of a new Cold War, we need to be cautious. While in some respects the world does look increasingly divided again, with the West on one side and a group of challengers on the other, the picture is far more complex than that. The 20th century confrontation was ideological, liberal democracy versus communism. Today, there's no such stark divide. China may be highly authoritarian, but it's also deeply capitalist. Russia has no clear ideology beyond state power, and India is still a democracy, albeit increasingly liberal under Modi. However, other possible members, such as Saudi Arabia or the UAE, remain security partners of the West, even as they hedge with Beijing and Moscow. Meanwhile, despite China's rapid growth, the West remains the preeminent economic bloc. In this sense, what we're seeing is not the emergence of a bipolar world with the West versus the rest. Instead, it's a messy landscape of shifting alignments, with states manoeuvring to maximise their options. Some NATO members, like Hungary and Slovakia, are cultivating ties with Russia, while others in Africa and Latin America embrace Chinese investment while still working with Western institutions. Indeed, even the place of the United States is now fundamentally questioned. Instead of two neat blocks, we're seeing a fluid competition. And while many in the global south will undoubtedly welcome the erosion of Western dominance after centuries of colonialism and decades of perceived double standards, there is in fact a darker side to all this. This emerging bloc is not a coalition of countries dedicated to upholding democracy and human rights. Instead, it's mostly made up of authoritarian and illiberal states. These will be given a free hand to repress dissent and entrench their power. As a result, while many people may cheer the decline of Western dominance, they may also find themselves living under far less accountable regimes. And this is why India's decision matters so much. As the world's largest democracy, its choices carry enormous weight. If it aligns with authoritarian states, it risks legitimising a model that prioritises state power over individual rights and places military might over international law. While Modi may see this as enhancing India's autonomy, the long-term results could be the erosion of the rules-based international order itself. So, has the West really lost the rest of the world? The simple answer would have to be not yet. But the trend is clear. The era of unchallenged Western dominance that emerged after the Cold War is now gone, not least of all because of Trump's decision to alienate long-standing partners and friends. A new multipolar system is clearly emerging, and India's decision to attend a Tianjin summit may stand as one of the clearest signs of this. But while many will undoubtedly celebrate the decline of Western dominance, the alternative is not necessarily a freer or fairer world. It may instead be a world of more authoritarianism, more fragmentation, and more dangerous rivalries. And this is perhaps the most important consequence of what we've just seen happen in China. I hope you found that useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.